Welcome to our read aloud today. Today we're going to be talking about Westward expansion, our fourth lesson, the story of Sequoia. Now, before we get into our lesson today, let's look forward to and read through our vocab words. I will read the word, you repeat it after me. Sights, voyage, transport. Today, we're going to be talking about the Native Americans. Now, the Native Americans were people that lived here in the United States way before the settlers, way before the 1800s. They lived a different life than what the settlers wanted. The settlers traded with them and stuff. Today, you're going to be hearing about Native American, a man that was very important to a tribe called the Cherokee. His name was Sequoia. Repeat that name with me, Sequoia. So the Cherokee right now currently are the largest Native American group in the United States, and they live mostly here in Oklahoma. Now, we're going to be talking later why Oklahoma is an important part to the Native American story as well. Again, Sequoia, he cared very much for his people and the Cherokee culture. And so European settlers were trying to replace the Native Americans. They're kind of being mean about it, actually very mean, and they were trying to get rid of their customs. But Sequoia wanted the Cherokee people to stand tall and be proud of their culture. We're going to hear more about how he stood tall and some important things he did for their culture as well. After today's read aloud, you should be able to identify the main topic of the story of Sequoia and show an understanding of the word create. People are not born knowing how to read and write. They have to learn these skills just as they have learned to talk. This is true for individuals like you and me, and it is also true for all groups of people. In the early 1800s, the Cherokee people had a spoken language they used to communicate, but they did not have a written language or reading and writing. The Cherokee were Native Americans who lived in what is now the southeastern United States. There were Cherokee settlements in Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. The Cherokee people had many folk tales that had been told and retold for many generations. But none of these tales had ever been written down because the Cherokee kept and passed down meaningful information orally or by talking. So up until this time, all the Cherokee people did to communicate was just by talking and speaking. They didn't have anything to read or write. That changed because of the hard work and dedication of a Cherokee man named Sequoia. Sequoia was born in Tennessee. He grew up with his Cherokee family speaking the Cherokee language. But Sequoia, who was a farmer and a silversmith, also spent a lot of time interacting with the white settlers who were living near the Cherokee lands. Interacting means talking with other people. So Sequoia spent time talking and doing things with the settlers. Sequoia believed, before we go that, here's some of the places that we talked about where the Cherokee were residing at that time. Sequoia believed that having a written language could make the Cherokee people even stronger. In 1809, he began to think about developing a written system for his native language. 3 years later, during the War of 1812, Sequoia and other Cherokee joined the United States under General Andrew Jackson to fight the British troops. There, Sequoia observed how the U.S. Army officers sent and received messages. The idea of developing a written language was not new to him, but Sequoia saw how useful reading and writing was when the officers needed to communicate. The Cherokee called the letters that the officers sent each other talking leaves. Sequoia had seen how helpful they were for the soldiers. He was convinced it would be a good idea if the Cherokee people could use talking leaves too. When the war ended, Sequoia kept working to develop a written system for the Cherokee language. At first, he tried to come up with a symbol for each word in the language. So in English, do we have individual symbols that stand for each word of our words? Or do we have a symbols or letters that you can put together to make a word? So he spent a year trying to create or make symbols for all the words in the Cherokee language. Even after a year, he was still not done. You can see Sequoia here carrying and making the symbols for every single word. He was carving them on little pieces of wood or shingles. Sequoia was so busy with his project developing the symbols for the written Cherokee language that he didn't plant any crops that year. All he did was work on creating symbols. His wife was worried. She thought Sequoia didn't know what he was doing. Why did his wife think he didn't know what he was doing? She thought he was just wasting his time. She did not understand what Sequoia was trying to do. How would she and her children survive without crops? What were they supposed to eat? Some historians have recorded that after a while, Sequoia's wife was so upset that she gathered up all of Sequoia's work and burned it. Others have said that his fellow Cherokee destroyed the symbols because they thought they would bring their people bad luck. Either way, Sequoia's work went up in smoke. Since his wife and his people didn't believe him, do you think Sequoia gave up trying to create a Cherokee written language because of all the work was gone? This was a heavy blow for Sequoia, but in a way, it was actually a good thing. It was good because Sequoia realized the approach or the way he had chosen to create symbols was not the best one. Love how he doesn't give up even in failure. It is possible to make a written system in which there is a different symbol for each word in the language. Writing systems of this sort do exist, but they took a long time to create and are very difficult to learn. Remember when we looked at and learned about ancient Chinese civilizations, the Chinese used symbols for every single object. Think what it would be like if we had to learn a different symbol for all the tens of thousands of words in the English language. How would we ever remember all those symbols? Again, how many symbols do we have? How many letters are in the alphabet? 26. Sequoia knew there had to be a better way. There was a better way, and eventually he found it. Sequoia realized that all the Cherokee words were made up of syllables. So he created 84 symbols to represent all of the syllables in the Cherokee language. This was extraordinarily clever. Sequoia had never learned to read and write, but he figured out a writing system for his native language. Once Sequoia had come up with the symbols for the 84 syllables in the Cherokee language, he was confident that he could teach other people to use them. He started by teaching his own daughter, Ayoka. Ayoka easily learned to read and write with the symbols Sequoia created. Then Sequoia went to show his writing system to the chiefs of the Cherokee Nation. At first, the chiefs were skeptical. Some of them did not understand what Sequoia was trying to do. Others thought his system might not really work. A few thought Sequoia might be trying to trick them. Why do you think the chiefs thought he was trying to trick them? Sequoia had expected this. He told the chiefs he could prove that his writing system really worked. He would send Ayoka away, then he would write down any word the chiefs wanted him to write. When he had done this, he would call Ayoka back and she would read the words. That way the chief would be sure Sequoia was not tricking them. The chiefs agreed. Ayoka went away. One of the chiefs spoke some words in the Cherokee language. Sequoia wrote down what he said using his syllable symbols. Then they sent for Ayoka. Do you think she'll be able to read it? When she returned, she read the words Sequoia had written. The chiefs were impressed, but they were not convinced. They tried the same test a few more times using different words each time. The chiefs had Sequoia write the symbols and then called Ayoka in to read them. Then the chiefs had Ayoka write the symbols and called Sequoia to read them. Finally, the chiefs concluded that Sequoia's writing system really did work. After all his hard work, Sequoia's writing system was accepted. He and Ayoka taught other Cherokee to use the symbols. And that is how the Cherokee learned to read and write. Later, many sad things happened to the Cherokee people. In the 1830s, they were forced to leave their lands. Later, they were forced onto reservations and into English speaking classrooms. But thanks to Sequoya's hard work, however, the Cherokee were able to keep their language alive. Even today, almost 200 years later, the Cherokee language is written with symbols developed by Sequoya. And so was Sequoya successful at making sure the Cherokee language never fade away? Yeah, he was. It's still around today. It's amazing. Sequoya is remembered and honored as the man who taught his people to read and write. However, he's not only honored by the Cherokee people. He's considered to be a national hero too. There is a statue of Sequoya in the U.S. Capitol building, and it is believed that the tall, strong sequoia trees that grow in California may have been named to honor the man who allowed his people to stand a little tall too. What is the main topic of this read aloud? Talk with the person next to you. Let's ask a couple other questions here. So, why did Sequoia feel that a writing system that he needed to write down the Cherokee language? Why was that so important to him? Did people really like what he was doing? How do you know? So, why was Sequoia's invention so important? So, our word today is the word create. I will say the word, you repeat it after me. Create. Do you see any little words inside of the big word? Yeah, I see the word eight. I mean, that makes me pretty hungry when I see that. How many syllables is this word? Yeah, it's two syllables. What is the blend in this word? Well, I see a CR blend at the beginning. Create. What sound does E say since it is at the end of a syllable? Well, E is a magical E here, so that's why this A is saying A. So this word is a verb, and create means to make or produce something new. In our class, the students will create their own paintings. Share with someone next to you. Name something that you have created. Make sure you use that word create in the sentence. So I used blank to create blank. So I used wood to create a brand new deck. Again, as we continue along with learning about the westward expansion, here's our timeline. Remember, a timeline starts on this side in the past and moves closer and closer to the future. And we put Cherokee right here, so kind of right before the Erie Canal, but when they were first learning how to write. Hope you enjoyed this read aloud. See you next time.